Hi there. My name is Levi, and I'm going to go ahead and share with you how I overcame fear. And in these times when things are really, really terrifying, just all around, how you can overcome fear too. Throughout my entire life, I've had fear on me. I've just been a very fearful person. I was afraid to go out and talk with people. I was afraid to go outside. I was afraid to really do anything outside of just staying in my room, really. I was kind of becoming a shut-in. And I was becoming antisocial, too. I was becoming pretty much all the things that you see a lot of people becoming today, and I was making excuses for it. I was sitting there just saying, I'm just not a people person. I just don't like to go outside. I'm not an outside person. I'm just kind of antisocial. I'm kind of an introvert. But what I was doing was I was making excuses for the fear. I was claiming that fear as a part of my identity. I was letting that fear sink into me. And mind you, this was a lifelong thing. This was a thing that was inadvertently passed down to me through, my parents, through my grandparents. It came down the line till it got to me. And because I had made it a part of my identity, I figured that I had it under control. I figured that I had the fear more or less under my thumb. That yes, it was a problem, but it wasn't a big problem. I just didn't like to do the things that basically just made me scared. And I just let that be a part of who I was. Well, some years later, I go out through this with my whole life. I'm in my 20s, I'm like this. I'm like in my teens like this. But when I get to my 30s, suddenly that fear runs out of control. Suddenly, I start having panic attacks. Now, in our society, we hear people say, I'm having a panic attack. It's kind of just become a term to say when you're uncomfortable, or, when you're really uncomfortable. You'll hear people say it a lot. But let's kind of get into what a real panic attack is, okay? It's debilitating. Okay, that fear becomes so intense that it starts physically, the only word I can think of is manifesting. It starts physically affecting your body. You start shaking, your heart starts pounding. It feels like you're dying, for a lack of a better word. Okay? And so the first time I had this was just in a parking lot, and it was a horrible experience. I thought I was genuinely dying. And from that point on, I started paying attention to my blood pressure. I started kind of looking at my blood pressure. And the thing that's crazy about fear is that people claim it's all in your mind. It can't hurt you. Fear can't hurt you, right? My blood pressure started shooting up to levels that were very dangerous, that would send me to the hospital. Okay. And I would go to the hospital thinking I was having a heart attack. It felt like I was having a heart attack. I'd have feelings in my chest and in my arm that mimicked a heart attack. So I'd go there, and they'd check me out, and I was completely fine. Physically, I was completely okay. Now, the blood pressure was skyrocketing, but there was no reason for it. So here I am with a disease that cannot be cured. It can be covered up with medicine. Maybe someone might make you feel better about it, but the root of that disease is in you, right? And I realized that when, my final trip to the hospital, I was starting to do a little bit better. I was starting to talk with my friends who are, very good Christian people. And they recommended me some Bible verses, and I started focusing in on those Bible verses. I started really paying attention to those Bible verses, right? So I go to the hospital this last time. Another panic attack, another moment where my heart's just going crazy. And even though I'm studying the Bible, even though I'm getting that knowledge of the things that I need from the Bible, the verses on fear, the verses on Jesus, it's in my head. It hadn't gotten into my heart yet. And so I go to the hospital this last time. And I'm in there. And I talked with one of my friends, and, his advice was just to keep reading the Bible, keep getting in the Word. And so even though I'm sitting there, I'm feeling the panic again. It hurts. Everything is just feeling crazy. I feel like I'm dying again. And I'm sitting there in the waiting room, and I'm just reading the Bible. And they get me in, and the doctor sees me. And this is a different doctor. I'd never seen this doctor before. And I'm very thankful for this doctor. I have no doubt that God put this doctor in my path for a reason. Usually if you've ever gone to the hospital, especially nowadays, it's very busy and the doctors don't have a lot of time for you. This doctor sat there and listened to everything I had to say about what I'd been going through, about the panic, about the attacks, about this thing that could happen to me anywhere. When I was driving, when I was out in the public, when I was at home, when I was with friends, these panic attacks could happen anywhere and they could be very dangerous. And he's listening to me and I get to the end of explaining it and he tells me, it sounds like you've been living in hell. And it really sunk in because it was hell. It was absolute hell. It was terrible. And so he recommends, he says, we'll see what we can do. We can get you some medicine. We can get you, some therapists. We can get you all these things. But in that moment, I knew that none of those things would take care of the root of the problem. The root of the problem was something that would be covered up at that point. But the moment I'm off the medicine, what happens? The moment the psychologist can't see me for a little while, what happens? I can trick myself, but at some point that fear will come back and there could be all these external things that would keep me from being able to properly deal with it. And I tell him as much. And he very graciously, he agrees. He just says, we'll figure something out. And he goes and he, goes about the business that he's doing. And so I'm left for a little bit of time. And so I pull out this small Bible, that I keep with me. I keep it with me all the time. It's just this tiny little thing. And I start reading it right there in the hospital again, as I had been doing. And in that moment that I'm reading it, something happens, something changes. Now, I have no doubt that in that time period that I was having those panic attacks, God, in his mercy, could have healed me right then and there. And you'll hear testimonies like that. He definitely can and will do that sometimes. But in that moment, what he did for me was, as I'm reading the Bible, he made what was in my head, what I knew about Jesus, he made it a reality. Those verses jumped out of the pages to me. And you hear these stories about Jesus, you know about Jesus, but when you intimately know him, when the truth of who he is jumps out of those pages and becomes a truth in your heart, Jesus will reveal who he is to you as the thing you need. And the thing I needed in that moment was more than just a healing of the fear. It was a knowledge of who he was and is. It is a knowledge that here is this person who is with me all the time, who loves me more than, think of how much your mother loves you or your friends love you or someone in your life who loves you the most. It's that multiplied more than you could ever imagine. And here he is, he's with me. And does he want those things for me? Does your friend want those things for you? Does your mother, does your family member, does whoever loves you, would they want you to be suffering like that? And this is the hard part that's hard to put, because it's going to be different for everybody, because he wants to reveal his character to you. He wants to reveal who he is to you personally for the thing that you need. And when he does that, you're not just going to be healed. That problem is going to be uprooted. That thing's going to be taken from you. And when that thing tries to come back, because as long as we're in the world, there will be the temptation to go back to that fear, to go back to that lust, to go back to whatever your issue is. He's going to give you what you need to overcome it in the future. He's going to give you what you need. It's only by knowing Christ that we understand how to overcome. And so I hear these messages about deliverance, and I'm thankful for them. And I have no doubt that he does deliver people like that, how he'll heal just like that sometimes. There's a mercy there. But I think for most Christians, for people who have Bibles in their homes, what he wants you to do more than anything is to seek after him, to know him personally, to really know him. Okay, not just something that you hear, people phrase, oh, you need to know God, you need to know God. You do need to know him. You need to know him on a personal level. You need to know who he is, and that head knowledge has to become truth. And when it becomes truth, that's when you will get what you will need. He will reveal himself as exactly what you need for the thing that you need him. And in that moment, you'll receive the healing that you're looking for. You'll be set free.